The night Joaquín Guzmán vanished from one of the most secure prisons in the world did not begin with chaos. It began with silence. A silence so ordinary. It was invisible. At exactly 8:52 p.m. on July 11, 2015, the security cameras inside Altiplano prison showed Guzmán pacing in his cell. Back and forth. Calm. Measured. Almost bored. Nothing seemed unusual. No alarms. No raised voices. No guards running. Just a man walking, waiting. Then, he disappeared. Not ran. Not forced. Not rushed. He simply vanished. Altiplano wasn't just any prison. It was designed to hold the most dangerous criminals in Mexico. High walls, armed guards, constant surveillance. Even the floors were reinforced to prevent tunneling. Or so they thought. Guzmán had been captured just months earlier. To the public, it looked like the end of a long chase. A victory. Headlines celebrated his arrest. Experts said he would never escape again. But Guzmán wasn't thinking about confinement. He was thinking underground. Inside his cell, the camera angle seemed perfect, too perfect. It captured most of the room, except one small blind spot near the shower area. And Guzmán knew it. 4 days, maybe weeks, he studied that blind spot like a scientist studying a flaw in an experiment. That tiny gap in visibility would become the doorway to freedom. At 8:52 p.m., Guzmán stepped into the shower area. Seconds passed. Then minutes. No one noticed anything unusual. Because nothing above ground had changed. But below the floor, everything had. Beneath the concrete slab of his cell, hidden far from the eyes of guards and cameras, a tunnel waited. Not a crude hole. Not a desperate dig. This was something else entirely. The tunnel stretched for nearly a mile beneath the prison grounds. It wasn't just long, it was engineered. Carefully measured. Precisely built. There were lights. There was ventilation. There were wooden supports to prevent collapse. And most shocking of all, there was a motorbike. Yes, a modified motorcycle running on rails, designed to carry Guzmán quickly through the narrow underground passage. This wasn't an escape plan. This was an operation. Above ground, guards continued their routines. Footsteps echoed through the halls. Radios crackled with ordinary chatter. Below ground, the tunnel hummed with quiet readiness. Somewhere beyond the prison walls, people were waiting. Watching the clock. Counting every second. Back inside the cell, Guzmán crouched in the shower area. The floor panel had already been cut and disguised. To anyone looking casually, it appeared solid. Untouched. But Guzmán knew where to step. He lifted the panel. Beneath it, darkness. A vertical shaft with a ladder leading down into the tunnel. He didn't hesitate. He climbed. Step by step, he descended into the earth, leaving behind the only world the guards believed existed. Above him, the panel was carefully closed. The illusion was complete. Minutes later, a guard walked past the cell. He glanced inside. Everything looked normal. The bed. The sink. The stillness. No movement. No suspicion. As Guzmán reached the bottom of the shaft, the tunnel opened up around him. It was narrow, but not suffocating. Lights lined the walls, casting a dim glow along the path ahead. The air was surprisingly fresh, thanks to a ventilation system hidden within the structure. And there it was. The motorbike. Mounted on rails, ready to move. Guzmán climbed onto it, his expression unreadable. This moment had been planned for months. Maybe longer. Everything depended on timing. Precision. Silence. He started the engine. The sound was low, controlled, barely more than a whisper beneath the earth. Then he accelerated. The tunnel carried him forward, away from the prison, away from the guards, away from the illusion of control. Every second increased the distance between him and capture. Above ground, no one knew. Not yet. It wasn't until later that night that something felt off. A guard noticed the unusual stillness of Guzman's cell. Too still. He called out. No response. He stepped closer. Still nothing. Then he looked toward the shower area. And saw something he couldn't explain. The alarm didn't go off immediately. For a moment, there was confusion. Disbelief. Because what they were about to discover wasn't just an escape. It was a failure on a scale no one had imagined. Right here, this moment of silence before everything explodes, this is where stories like this pull you in. Because what looks impossible just happened. If you're already feeling the tension, the mystery, the disbelief, this is just the beginning. Make sure you stay with the story. Because what comes next only gets deeper, darker, and more unbelievable. When the truth finally surfaced, it hit like a shockwave. Guards rushed in. The floor panel was discovered. The ladder. The tunnel. The realization spread like wildfire through the prison. He was gone. Outside, search teams were mobilized. Roads were blocked. Helicopters were deployed. But they were already too late. Far too late. Because by the time the alarm sounded, Joaquín Guzmán was already miles away. But here's the real question. How did a tunnel this massive get built without anyone noticing? Who helped him? And how deep does the corruption go? Because in the next chapter, the story goes beyond the prison walls, into a hidden network of secrets, money, and power that made the impossible possible. And once you see it, you'll realize this escape didn't start in a cell. It started long before that. The tunnel didn't begin beneath the prison. It began in someone's mind. Long before Joaquín Guzmán ever stepped into Altiplano prison, the idea of his escape was already alive, growing, evolving, waiting for the right moment to become real. And once it started, it never stopped. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a sudden opportunity. It was design. Somewhere beyond the prison walls, in quiet rooms far from surveillance cameras, people were working. Not just one or two, but a network. Engineers, builders, insiders, loyalists. Each person played a role. Each role had a purpose. And none of them could afford to fail. Because failure didn't just mean prison. It meant disappearance. The first question was simple. Where do you dig? Not every inch of land surrounding the prison was suitable. The ground had to be stable. The distance had to be precise. The tunnel had to connect to a point inside Guzman's cell, specifically that tiny blind spot near the shower. They needed exact measurements, exact coordinates, which meant one thing. They needed help from the inside. Prisons are built on control, but control depends on people. And people can be compromised. A guard who looks the other way. An official who approves a blueprint without asking questions. A worker who installs something just slightly off from standard. Small decisions. Small cracks. But when those cracks align, the system breaks. No one knows exactly who helped. But evidence later suggested something chilling. The tunnel didn't just reach the prison. It aligned perfectly with Guzman's cell. Not close. Not approximate. Perfect. As if someone had drawn a straight line from freedom, directly to him. Construction began miles away from the prison, hidden inside a building that looked completely ordinary from the outside. A warehouse. Quiet. Unremarkable. Invisible. Inside, however, it was anything but normal. Heavy machinery hummed beneath the floor. Workers moved with precision. Dirt was removed carefully, transported, hidden. Every step was controlled. Every sound, contained. Because noise was the enemy. Attention was the enemy. Time was the enemy. The tunnel stretched forward inch by inch. Foot by foot. Day by day. Through soil, through rock, through uncertainty. And yet, no one stopped it. No alarms were triggered. No suspicions raised. It was as if the earth itself was cooperating. This wasn't a hole. It was infrastructure. Lights were installed along the walls, powered by a hidden electrical system. Ventilation pipes ensured fresh air flowed through the tunnel, preventing suffocation. Wooden beams supported the structure, keeping it stable. And then, the most unbelievable detail of all. Rails. Metal tracks laid along the length of the tunnel. Because walking wasn't fast enough. They needed speed. They needed efficiency. They needed certainty. So they built a custom motorbike. Compact. Modified. Designed to ride along the rails like a train. It could carry a man through the entire tunnel in minutes. Think about that for a second. While guards walked above ground, believing everything was secure, an entire underground highway was being built beneath their feet. But no plan, no matter how perfect, can wait forever. There was pressure. Constant pressure. Every day Guzman remained inside the prison increased the risk. More eyes. More scrutiny. More chances for something to go wrong. So the timeline tightened. Everything had to be ready. Everything had to align. Inside the prison, Guzman played his role perfectly. Calm. Controlled. Predictable. He gave the guards no reason to suspect anything unusual. No sudden changes. No strange behavior. Just routine. Always routine. Because routine creates comfort. And comfort creates blindness. As the tunnel approached the prison, the most dangerous phase began. Precision became everything. One wrong calculation, and they could miss the cell entirely. One mistake, and the tunnel could collapse. One noise, and everything would be exposed. They dug slower, carefully, listening, measuring, adjusting, until finally, they reached it. Right beneath Guzman's cell. Exactly where they needed to be. The final breakthrough was silent. Controlled. Perfect. A small opening, reinforced and hidden, connecting the tunnel to the floor of the shower area. The blind spot. The only place the cameras couldn't see. Back above ground, nothing changed. Guards still walked their rounds. Cameras still recorded empty routines. Officials still believed the prison was secure. Because from their perspective, it was. They were watching the doors, the windows, the walls. But they weren't watching the ground. By the time the tunnel was complete, the operation had reached its most fragile point. Everything depended on one night. One window of time. One decision. Inside his cell, Joaquín Guzmán knew it. He had waited. Prepared. Trusted the plan. Now, there was only one thing left to do. Step into the unknown. Right here, this is where most people underestimate the story. Because building the tunnel was only half the battle. The real challenge. Getting out, and staying free. If you're following this, if you're feeling the tension build, make sure you don't miss what comes next. Because the escape itself? That's where everything could have gone wrong. In the next chapter, you'll see the escape unfold in real time. Second by second. At exactly 8:52 p.m., inside Altiplano prison, Joaquín Guzmán made his final move. He walked into the shower area. Calm. Controlled. Unhurried. To anyone watching, it looked like routine. Just another night. Just another inmate. But this time, it was different. Guzmán stood over the exact spot. The hidden panel beneath his feet. The doorway to everything he had been waiting for. There was no turning back now. No second chances. If anything went wrong, there would be no escape. He crouched, lifted the panel, and stared into the darkness below. For a brief moment, everything slowed. The sounds of the prison faded. The weight of the risk settled in. Because once he stepped down, he wasn't just escaping a prison. He was challenging an entire system. Then, he climbed down. The ladder creaked softly as he descended. Each step took him further away from the world above. Further away from the guards. Further away from control. When his feet touched the ground, Guzman didn't waste another second. He accelerated. The motorbike surged forward along the rails. Fast, controlled, relentless. The tunnel walls blurred as he moved. Lights passed overhead in rapid sequence. The distance closed quickly. Every second now was freedom gained. Behind him, the prison, the risk, the danger. Ahead, the unknown. After what felt like minutes, but was likely less, a faint light appeared ahead. The end of the tunnel. Guzman slowed slightly. Heart steady. Eyes locked forward. As he approached, the tunnel widened. The air changed. Fresher. Cooler. Then, he emerged. Outside, in a hidden structure miles away from the prison, people were waiting. Engines ready. Routes planned. Everything prepared. Guzman stepped off the bike. Climbed out. And for the first time in months, he was no longer inside Altiplano prison. He was free. There was no celebration. Only movement. Guzman climbed in. The door shut. And just like that, they were gone. The vehicle moved quickly through dark rural roads, avoiding main highways, avoiding attention. Every turn was planned. Every route pre-mapped. This wasn't improvisation. This was Phase 2. Inside Altiplano prison, the illusion was collapsing. A guard approached the cell. Called out. No response. He stepped closer. Looked toward the shower area. Paused. Something was wrong. Minutes later, the truth exploded through the facility. Alarms blared. Lights flashed. Guards rushed in from every direction. Then they saw it. The hole. The ladder. The tunnel. And in that moment, everything changed. News traveled fast. Faster than anyone expected. Within hours, the escape of Joaquín Guzmán was no longer a prison issue. It was a national crisis. Government officials were alerted. Military units mobilized. Roadblocks were set up across major routes. Air surveillance was deployed. Helicopters cut through the night sky. Search teams flooded the surrounding areas. But they were already chasing shadows. By the time authorities reached the tunnel's exit point, it was empty. No sign of Guzman. No clear direction. Just the reality of what had happened. A prison built to be escape-proof had failed. Meanwhile, Guzman was already miles away. Switching vehicles. Changing routes. Disappearing into a network designed for one purpose. To keep him invisible. Safe houses had been prepared in advance. Locations carefully chosen. Remote. Secure. Untraceable. Every move was calculated. Every stop temporary. Because staying still meant being found. By morning, the story had exploded across the globe. News outlets interrupted programming. Headlines flashed everywhere. A drug lord. A tunnel. A motorcycle. A prison escape that sounded impossible, but was real. People were stunned. Authorities were under pressure. And questions started pouring in. How did this happen? Who helped him? How deep did this go? Investigators began digging, above ground this time. And what they found was unsettling. The tunnel wasn't just advanced. It was precise. Too precise. Which meant one thing. This wasn't just an external operation. There were signs. Small ones at first. Irregularities. Unexplained approvals. Gaps in oversight. Then bigger ones. People who had access. Who shouldn't have. People who knew things. They never reported. The possibility became undeniable. Inside help. As the investigation deepened, so did the urgency. Because every hour Guzman remained free, increased the risk. Not just to law enforcement, but to the credibility of the entire system. This wasn't just about catching a fugitive anymore. It was about restoring control. Right here, this is where the story shifts again. Because now, it's no longer just about the escape. It's about the aftermath, the consequences, the hunt. Authorities tracked leads, followed tips, analyzed every possible route. But Guzman wasn't running blindly. He was moving strategically, always one step ahead, changing locations, switching communication methods, avoiding patterns. He knew how the system worked, because he had studied it for years, and now, he was using that knowledge against it. But here's the twist. No matter how perfect an escape is, it always leaves something behind. A trace, a mistake, a connection, and in the next chapter, one small detail changes everything. A breakthrough, a lead, a moment that shifts the entire hunt. Because freedom doesn't last forever. And the question is no longer if they will find him, but when. Freedom is powerful, but it is never permanent. For months after his escape from Altiplano prison, Joaquín Guzmán remained a ghost. No confirmed sightings, no direct contact, no clear trail. And yet, he was there, moving, watching, waiting. Guzmán didn't disappear by accident. He disappeared by design. Safe houses across remote regions, trusted allies, layered communication systems. He rarely stayed in one place for long. Never long enough to be predictable. Never long enough to be caught. Every movement was calculated. Every risk measured. But there was one thing he couldn't escape. Attention. The world was watching. Governments were under pressure. Law enforcement agencies intensified their efforts. Resources increased. Technology improved. This wasn't just about capturing a fugitive anymore. It was about restoring confidence. And they were getting closer. No plan is perfect. No system is flawless. Even the most careful person makes a mistake. For Guzman, that mistake wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was small, subtle, human. Communication. Somewhere, somehow, a signal was detected. A pattern noticed. A connection made. It wasn't enough at first, but it was something. And in a case like this, something is everything. Investigators followed the lead. Slowly, carefully. They didn't rush, because rushing could destroy everything. Instead, they built the case piece by piece. Tracking movements, analyzing behavior, connecting dots, until finally, the picture became clear. January 2016. A house in Los Mochis. At first glance, it looked ordinary, quiet, unremarkable. But inside, everything changed. Before dawn, forces moved in. Silently, strategically, they surrounded the house. Positions locked. No escape. Then, they entered. Gunfire erupted. Short. Intense. The element of surprise was gone. But the outcome was inevitable. In the chaos, Guzman ran. Not through a tunnel this time. Through a bathroom. And then, into another hidden passage. A sewer system. Desperate. Fast. But this time, it wasn't enough. He emerged. But not into freedom. Into capture. Joaquín Guzmán was taken into custody once again. The man who built tunnels. Who disappeared beneath the earth. Who outsmarted one of the most secure prisons in the world. Was back in chains. The tunnel. The escape. The months of freedom. They became legend. A story told across the world. Analyzed. Debated. Never forgotten. Because it wasn't just about one man. It was about what he proved. That even the strongest systems have weaknesses. That even the tightest security can be broken. That even the impossible can happen. But, in the end, every escape has a limit. Every run has an ending. And every shadow eventually meets the light. The question isn't whether someone can escape. It's how long they can stay free. And for Joaquín Guzmán, the answer was clear. Not forever. Like, share and subscribe. Thank you.